Welcome back to Room 114. Hope everyone enjoyed a nice Easter break. Good to see everyone back. And we are going to pick up where we left off last week, talking about Chapter 3, Section 4, Motion and Forces. So the first thing I want to do is go over some of the main concepts with you guys of the section. Slide up here. Essentially, four main concepts in the section that we just went over here. The first one would be balanced and unbalanced forces. If we have someone pushing to the right on a box with a force of 5 newtons, someone else is pushing back to the left on a box also with a force of 5 newtons, the net force in that box is going to be 0. If the net force is 0, we call it a balanced force, and there's going to be no change in velocity or no motion with that box. If the person over here on the right increases their force to 10 newtons, and the person on the left are still pushing to the left with a force of 5 newtons, then the net force will be 5 newtons to the right. We call that an unbalanced force. An unbalanced force results in a change of velocity. Remember, velocity can change when you speed up, slow down, or when you change direction. The second main concept in this section was Newton's first law of motion. And essentially, Newton's first law of motion says an object at rest will stay at rest. So if I were to take this marker and set it on the arm of the chair, it's going to stay on that arm of the chair, essentially, until we come back and watch tomorrow's video. The second one says an object in motion will stay in motion. So if I were to take one of the balls from our lab and roll that ball, right, that ball should continue rolling forever. However, we know that doesn't happen. Now, how are we breaking the laws of physics here? Well, that's where it's very, very important. The third part of Newton's first law of motion says unless, part C here, unless acted on by an unbalanced force. Well, the unbalanced force acting on this marker would be me hitting it, pushing it, moving it. The unbalanced force acting on that ball rolling across the floor is going to be the force of friction, slowing it down. Could be the force of air resistance, could be the force of someone picking it up, or running into the wall. Those would all be unbalanced forces that would cause that to stop from moving. So in theory, if we were to put that in a vacuum and eliminate friction, we would be able to have that ball continue rolling forever. Speaking of friction, that's our third part of the lesson here. Friction is a force that opposes motion. The two factors that affect friction are the surfaces that are touching one another, and you see this all the time. Ice has much less friction than, say, blacktop. Right? You can slide very easily across the ice because of what the surface is made of, whereas the surface of the blacktop is much rougher and it's going to have much more friction. Sometimes friction is good. In the case that blacktop gives us traction, it keeps our cars moving, whereas ice decreases the amount of friction, and sometimes we can have accidents on the road with the ice. However, sometimes friction can be negative as well. We end up with cars slowing down, tires wearing because of friction. We have a decrease in our gas mileage because of friction. So we need an amount of friction, but it can also be our enemy at times. The other factor that affects friction are the forces that are pushing it together. The more mass pushing down on that, the more force you have pushing those two surfaces together, the greater the amount of friction is going to be. So those are the main concepts we didn't get a chance to go over last week. I want to make sure I took a minute and went over those with you. The second thing I want to go over with you today are the review questions you did last week on page 82. The first one says, before dancing on a smooth wooden floor, ballet dancers sometimes put a sticky powder called rosin on the soles of their shoes. Why? What are they trying to do? Well, they don't want to go sliding across the floor and crashing, so they want to increase friction. That's kind of the same thing with weightlifters, right? They'll put the chalk on their hands to get a better grip to increase the friction on that bar so it won't slip out of their hands. The second one talks about inertia. Remember, inertia is solely determined on the object's mass, so therefore the jet plane would have more inertia than the speeding car. The third one asks about 3 examples from sports in which force changes the velocity of an object or person. And we can think of almost any sport. In tennis, when the racket hits the ball, it changes that ball's velocity. Baseball, almost the same thing. Kicking a soccer ball, throwing or catching a football, those would all be examples of forces that are changing the motion of that ball. We're going to move on today. Your assignment for today is to read section 3.5 called Gravity, a Familiar Force, and to find the vocabulary terms, put those on your Google Doc. This is our last section of the chapter, so I will be collecting that Google Doc later on this week with all of your vocabulary terms on it from chapter 3. Also, that's going to help you with the answer to today's warm-up question as you read through 3.5. The force that Kylo Ren has, that Rey has, that Luke Skywalker and Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi and all the great Jedis in the history of Star Wars is essentially the force of gravity. And that's why it's science fiction. The science behind this force that they're using talks essentially about gravity. However, the fiction is the force of Rey on the lightsaber is not going to be able to overcome the force of the Earth and its attraction, its gravitational attraction to that lightsaber. So be thinking of that. Essentially, the science part of the force is the force of gravity. The fiction part is we can't just negate the Earth's forces as well. So have a fantastic day today. Make sure you read, define those vocabulary terms. Make sure you answer your warm-up question. The plan for the rest of the week, tomorrow we're done with this chapter. So we're going to go over the section review questions. We're going to go start the chapter review tomorrow. On Thursday, your assignment is essentially going to be to study for your exam, which would include, if you have any questions, make sure you're logging on to my office hours. Obviously, you can do that any day. Thursday would be a great day because I'm going to go over the answers to the review questions during my office hour. So you probably want to log in so we can do that. Friday is going to be your first distance learning online exam, but essentially it's not going to be all that different than the exams we had back in class. So hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone had a great break, and I will talk to you soon.